What is your best substitute teacher story? We had an Indian substitute teacher for English. He mispronounced so many words. Honesty hornesty also sounds like hornesty. Shakespeare sexpare. It was so hard to keep a straight face. Later, we all helped him pronounce those words. He was a good sport about it. My story is not from a student's perspective. I was an assistant principal at an urban middle school. One day a student, who had spent plenty of time in trouble herself, came into my office. She said, "I think you should know that the sub in our last class is drinking something out of a flask in the desk. You have to understand that even though this kid was high maintenance, she generally told the truth. In fact, she normally found herself in trouble for being brutally honest, to the point of being ugly about it. So, I went up to the class to ask the guy about it. He was about 60, thin guy, well-kept, white shirt and tie. Seriously, he looked as professional as any sub I have ever seen. So, I related the story to him expecting him to laugh and explain what really happened. He said, "I guess I should just go." He then proceeded to take his flask out of the desk and leave the building. When I was in around 14, we had a sub come to our school. This was not a particularly nice school, nor was it in a particularly nice area. However, one half of the student population was extremely well behaved and the other half, basically an army of mecha Hitlers. This sub, who we all called Mr. Mustache because he had a mustache creative bunch, was the most soft-spoken and polite gentleman I have ever met. Even to this day, over a decade later, I have not witnessed somebody as calm and soothing. He turned my math class into a collection of algebraic angels. I swear this was some next level "oh captain, my captain" shit. Mr. Mustache had effectively exorcised the demons of 40 high school children in under a week. He had managed to do in 5 days what others had been incapable of years. Then he died, in class, and the descent into madness began around a week later after everybody had mourned the mustache. Basically, his replacement, that poor bitch, did not stand a chance. Our usual teacher was named Dick and our sub could not control the class at all. 20 minutes and the entire class was pounding on their desks and screaming, "We want Dick, we want Dick." She quit, never came back. This one guy who was a part-time teacher and part-time pizza delivery driver, he was a nice guy, but dopey as duck. He was substituting for my physics teacher once and then sat for about 30 minutes before looking up and asking, "Do you guys know what you are doing?" After we replied no, he left to find the other teacher to ask her. He then came back and said, "You're doing your course booklets," before sitting for another 10 minutes. He eventually asked, "Do you guys have course booklets?" We did not. "Oh, okay, sorry, we only had 10 minutes left of class." But we had to sit in complete silence. Guy that told us a story about how he was friends with a retard when he was about 12 and they went rabbit hunting. He shot his first rabbit and when they ran up to it, his retarded friend actually retarded, as he told it, noticed it was still alive and said he had finished it off. He had a 12-gauge shotgun, which he then used at point-blank range to blast the rabbit into oblivion before our teacher had a chance to stop him. We convinced a substitute that we were a special needs class and would have outbursts at random. We kept this up for 2 weeks. For example, she was talking about the short story we read and the one guy stood on his desk and just made a warblable sound. She asked him very nicely to sit down and he replied warblarbala. I informed the teacher she will just have to wait a minute because he is only staring at the sun through the upper window and it will pass very soon. Somehow the guy kept a straight face and stared directly into the sun without blinking. Before a minute later he sat down sounding disappointed and said wearables. Ms. Mitchell was my 6th grade science class substitute for about 2 months. She told us practically every day how much she loved earthquakes and how one time she was doing toilet yoga, you know, like you do to help her shit more easily, and there was an earthquake and it was her favorite experience in her entire life. She also told us that hot dogs give you cancer. Also in 3rd grade one substitute had a mental breakdown and choked an 8-year-old with a ruler. The details are fuzzy but I am pretty sure his teaching license was suspended. We had a substitute teacher that came into school one day wearing a trench coat and fedora. He looked so creepy that the French teacher called him in as an intruder and our school was put on lockdown. He was just a weird guy in general. He would draw inappropriate cartoons on the board and have the class vote on which accent he would use for the day. There used to be this sub that did middle and high school. He had order pizzas and shit, bring in cupcakes, told really crazy stories. He has had his own Twitter to tell what classes he had be subbing in so you could skip in there. He was pretty cool. Deans hated him though. I do not know how he kept his job. There was this substitute teacher that I had consistently all throughout high school who claimed to have created Ice Age and that the idea was stolen from him. He would even bring out his original storyboards as proof. Happened last week, believe it or not. It was second period Spanish class. I walked in a few minutes before first period dismissal bell rang because I was in a study hall and that teacher gave no ducks. I walked in and noticed that we had a sub. We will call him Mr. Miller because that is his name. I had him previously and I remember him telling us that he could not work a projector because his grandparents were Amish. Anyway, he asks me if I knew we had a test today. I tell him I had no idea. Truth. He proceeds to show me the test. I notice it is on reflexive verbs. I walk over to my desk and start to look over a nearby poster full of reflexive verbs that had been taken down due to the impending test. A moment or so later, my friend Joe walks over and puts the poster back on the wall. However, he put it on the whiteboard at the front of the room. Mr. Miller was close enough that he was standing right next to it reading it and he had no idea it should not be on the wall. Eventually, Joe moved the poster to the far wall in case a Spanish teacher saw it. Many of our walls were made of windows, and we took our test. From a quick poll afterwards, almost everyone in the class cheated. Still, Mr. Miller is one of my favorite subs. Love that guy. These are fantastic thus far. My best story involves us Americans and our infatuation with accents. We had a Scottish sub who was super nice and laid back. Towards the end of class, a kid in my class asked if she would spend the last 5 minutes reading the Braveheart speech to us aloud. She did out of amusement. It was ducking awesome. Black guy with a heavy accent. Maybe from somewhere in Africa, but heck if I know. He shaved with a knife while we did our assignments in silence. Junior year of high school, Carrie Brownstein of Sleater-Kinney and much later, Portlandia fame was the substitute teacher for my first period English elective and third period English class once a week for a few months. I was a bit too young to be a riot GRRL, but I loved Sleater-Kinney, and had quite the little girl fan moment when I walked in. Each day she taught, she said she liked my cardigans, and let me take attendance sometimes, so, I felt like $1,000,000. We were in 7th or 8th grade. We had a substitute teacher, Mrs. Rowan. We have to go back to homeroom after lunch or an assembly or something. I do not really remember exactly, maybe it was just the morning. Anyways, we are casually sitting in a classroom waiting for a bell to go to the next class. The most remarkable thing about Mrs. Rowan was her lack of there being anything remarkable about her. She would substitute and that is all I remember about her. Other than this story, people are chatting and I am in the second row. The quiet kid in front of me turns to me as I am half-heartedly listening and participating in a conversation. I think Mrs. Crohan just died, he says. She just fell out of her chair as she grabbed her chest. I look up and she is not sitting at the desk. I cannot see her as the desk is blocking my view. She was there 10 seconds earlier. I turned back to the girls I was half-heartedly chatting with and asked them if Mrs. Crowan died or if she is just picking something up. They are sitting on my right and can see that side of the desk. This was a public middle school in a Boston suburb, not super affluent, but certainly not the ghetto either. Very wide place. Anyways, this girl that gets busting from the city, this tall, loud black girl shrieks at the top of her lungs, "Mrs. Crowan's dead, Mrs. Crowan's dead, Lord Almighty." She gets up and runs out the hall screaming at the top of her lungs. Up and down the hallways, everyone runs out of the room. The other teachers come and the principal comes in and finally the nurse comes in. Then poor Mr. Crowan, also a teacher there, comes in. Ambulance shows up and takes her to the hospital. Anyways, Mrs. Crowan did not make it. I was the second person to know that she died. That was probably the most remarkable thing about my 8th grade academic career. I once had a substitute teacher who had a Morgan Freeman voice. It was very mesmerizing, and I was so happy when he told us that he was going to be reading out loud to us from the textbook. There was a sub that was essentially a legend at my school. We did not even know his name for years because he never told us. He just told us to call him sir. He was an old man, somewhere in his 80s I think, and would wear a sweater vest and bow tie literally every day, earning him the nickname of Mr. Boaty. He had a reputation among us for going on very long unnecessary tangents. We were just taking a test and watching a movie afterwards one day, and this guy spent 15 minutes talking about the best way to write your name on the paper and why we should always have two number 2 pencils at all times. At one point, someone in my school made a fan page on Facebook dedicated to him, and it pretty much exploded with likes, follows, whatever Facebook pages use, within a few days, with people liking it pretty much all over the state, even in other states. My favorite experience with him personally was actually in a study hall. My friend and I were sitting next to Eco Third talking, and then we slowly look over as this man is cleaning desks, quietly saying to himself, "I want to see my face in those boots." Soldier, sir. Yes sir. Had a rather old man who forgot what he was doing and just walked out of class and never came back. Security later found him walking around the parking lot because he could not find his car, but he was in the student parking. When I was 13 I had a paper route, and when I was collecting the money a young woman around the age of 22 came to the door in a bath towel and nothing else. When she turned around to grab her purse, her towel dropped and I seen everything, and let me say, as a 13-year-old it was amazing. Fast forward 4 years, I am a senior in high school, and in my class the substitute teacher that day happened to be the same woman I seen naked that day 4 years earlier. When I turned in my paper she asked if I used to be her paper boy, and I replied yes. Her face got all red and she said, "Let's keep what happened between us please." I ended up having her as a substitute a few other times that year, and every time she seen me her face would get bright red. I have two actually. The first one is an older woman who would sing the French national anthem, and then follow it up with a song about her cat Oedipus. The second was an odd guy whom people discovered had a YouTube channel called the Nickelodeon Nutcase, where he did reviews of shows like iCarly and Victorious, and I guess would also read passages from the Bible. When I was in the 5th grade, the music teacher had one of those little plastic flowers that was sound activated. It was rather amusing to us kids, especially whenever she had play whatever song we were singing. I mainly remember us practicing Whitney Houston's Greatest Love of All for our DARE graduation, and Bette Midler's From a Distance for the 5th grade graduation. When she went on maternity leave, we had a substitute teacher that not only had us do the basic music exercises, but she had rock out on the piano when we asked her to turn the flower on. She said, "I know a song it will like," as if it was alive. She then played the opening riff for Bob Seger's old-time rock and roll on the piano. She also played some of Jerry Lee Lewis' Great Balls of Fire. In 8th grade, we had a sub who loved us. Every sub would normally leave notes for the teacher upon return, and this sub was probably the first one I remembered actually really liking. We liked her just as much as we liked our actual teacher. When the teacher had to go away for a few weeks for surgery, we told her, "We want Ems Dixon." I think that was her last name, not important. The teacher made the request to the principal, and made damn sure we got the sub. Not a sub but a student teacher, middle school, maybe 8th grade, so we were that ripe age of finding unclothed ankles attractive. This student teacher was 21, finishing up college, and stacked, and I mean stacked, absolutely gorgeous. She dressed well, but maybe a little too much dinner party and not enough office meeting. Frequent wore low-cut shirts, decently sheer fabrics, and pencil skirts. But what smote the group of pubescent boys? Daily whale tail, not even an attempt to hide it. Sub joked that the disabled kid might shoot up the school while he was in the bathroom. Student told her to shut the duck up. Student got sent to the office and explained the situation, did not get in trouble, and the sub was not allowed back to school. Middle of the semester in woodshop class. We all went through our safety whatever at the beginning of the semester, therefore we were all working on our little projects. We get a sub for one day who was basically just supposed to babysit us while we finished our little cars or whatever we were doing. Instead of just letting us finish our projects, she takes it upon herself to start teaching us about safety. Why? So she goes on her little safety spiel and walks up to a running saw blade. She tells all of us, now you never ever want to put your hand directly to the blade like this while it is running, and proceeds to saw her finger lengthwise down to the first knuckle. We all freaked out and she started sputtering, oh I did not know it was on no because apparently the old loud ass machine was not loud enough for her to hear. So she runs off to the nurse and none of us see her again after that. They called in another sub. For that sub, too long didn't read, substitute thinks we need a live safety demo in woodshop class. We get 1. Consider subscribing if you enjoyed this video and if you want to see more of Reddit Universe.